I remembered to do the button this time. This morning I said a few things and nobody heard me. Thank you so much. I am Scott Wilson, my wife January. We are full-time missionaries to Mexico. That is my official title. I'm trying to get paid by the letter, but they're only giving me about $1 a letter so I can afford 2 tacos. But we are full-time missionaries. Actually, this coming November, it will be 10 years we've been in the field. Meadows is our sending church. This is where we have been sent out from. Sometimes we say, oh, we live down in Mexico, and people are like, oh, you must be a long way away. We actually live just south of the border, about 15 minutes in Rosarito. So it's kind of Mexico light. It's not like heavy-duty Mexico. It's just kind of that mix between Mexico and the U.S. But that's actually where we live, so it makes it real easy. Right now, it's a whopping 72 degrees at home. So my wife's missing it. I am not. I'm loving the heat here. So one of the things about being a missionary is there's a lot of assumptions that are made regarding, just having that title. And when we were getting ready to actually deploy, I had some friends from college that were coming through town, and I thought I was going to drop this big bomb on them that this is what we're going to do. We're going to go be missionaries in Mexico, and it was going to surprise them, and they were going to be, oh, wow, you're doing that? And so I'm like, after I say that, they're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I'm like, what? I'm like, why do you think that? She goes, well, your dad's a pastor. See, the thing is I'm a third-generation Foursquare minister. My parents met at Life Bible College, is what they were called back then. It's now LPU, Life Pacific University. My dad's parents met at Life Bible College, so when my dad wanted me to go, I said, absolutely not. I am not ready for a wife yet. And so there's this connotation of somebody who's grown up in the church, and a lot of people say, oh, well, you're a PK. I'm like, no, I'm not a pastor's kid. I don't like that title because there's a lot of baggage that comes with that title. So I say I am a TO. I'm a theologian's offspring. And it helps break the ice a little bit and kind of separate myself from the rest of the crowd, which is what I always like to do. But the thing is that in my mind, I'm like, I'm not becoming a missionary because my dad's a pastor. I'm becoming a missionary in spite of my dad's being a pastor. See, the thing is that my dad was a pastor for 38 years. They actually, 2 years ago, they got their 60-year pin of how long they had been in ministry. And for 38 years, he was the pastor of a small little town out in the middle of nowhere on the other side of Death Valley. Now, how many here have seen the movie Footloose? I mean, the original, not the new one, but that was me, except I'm not a girl, and we lived in the desert. But it was a similar thing. I mean, I couldn't go to dances. I couldn't go to the theater. There's a lot of restrictions that were put on me. It was a small town. Not only was my dad a prominent pastor in that town, but he was also the athletic trainer, so I couldn't get away from him even at school, or even he was always on the bus when we went on away to games and stuff like that. I couldn't get away from him. All my friends knew him. What that led to was the fact that I never had to defend my faith. Like everybody knew. It's like, well, Scott's not at practice on Wednesday night. Why? Oh, because he's at church, of course. Why is Scott doing, not a part of this? Like, well, this is because his dad's a pastor. Of course he's not doing that. I never had to defend why I was doing anything, what faith I had. I never had to defend any of that. Well, the reality of it was that I did not have those basic daily disciplines in my life that help define what your faith is. Bible reading, devotions, prayer life. People made assumptions that I had a very strong and robust prayer life. I had none. They thought I was reading the Bible all the time. No, only when I had to. They thought I was doing devotions. I'm like, yeah, only at camp. All that time, nobody really checked in on me to find out how I was, how my personal relationship with God was. And so when I got to college, And all of a sudden, I'm running into people who, surprisingly enough, don't know my dad. And by the way, that was very intentional. I moved far enough away. Far enough where I could visit for the weekend, but not so far that they had to let me know when they were showing up. Like, they weren't going to just drop by. But the thing is that my friends didn't know who my dad was. And so they started asking me, why do you do this? Why do you go to church? Not that I was doing it a lot, but why were you doing that? And I didn't have good reasons. Because I realized that all my life up to that point, I was living my parents' faith, not my faith. And so when I'm finally having to defend it, I'm finally having to explain why I'm doing things, I didn't have good reasons. And plus, being a know-it-all college student, I'm like, you know what, I can figure this stuff out. And what I tried to do was change who God was in order to make it so I didn't feel as guilty to do the things that I wanted to do. But that was the bottom line. I'm changing God to justify my actions. So like, oh, he really doesn't mean that. He doesn't really mean you don't have to do those things or stay away from those things. I could do whatever I want and still be considered Christian-y. And so that actually started my journey away from God. For many years, I was walking away from God. There was other years that I was running. When I moved to Vegas, I was running from God. And trust me, my dad let me know. He was not happy that I was moving to Sin City. There was another part of my life, a big season of my life, where I was literally mad at God because I had a personal tragedy that I couldn't align with the faith that I had because I had a very shallow faith. So when I was trying to deal with these things in my life, I didn't have the resources, I didn't have the foundation that would keep me connected to him. And so I tried to do things on my own. And that lasted for 20 years. For 20 years, I was away from God. Until I met January. And as we started dating, she said she wanted to start to go to church. And I'm like, man. But being a guy trying to impress a girl, I'm like, sure, we'll go. She goes, well, let's go to a Foursquare church. Your dad's a Foursquare pastor. I had lived in Vegas for 7 years at that point, and I had no idea where a Foursquare church was. So we like, okay, let's grab the Yellow Pages. Sorry for the younger generation. It was a book about this big, and it's where you would look up addresses and phone numbers. So it had two purposes. One was information. The second one was as a booster seat for Thanksgiving. Right? That was all it was used for. I don't know what they use nowadays because you can't put an iPad under somebody. It's not going to make him any taller. But we looked up and tried to find an address, and at the time, I couldn't find it. We looked. I know where it is now, but we couldn't find it then. But then I remembered, I'm like, oh, I remember seeing a sign of a Foursquare church over on Alexander. So we drove by, and sure enough, there was the sign. I'm like, okay, well, let's go there. So the next day, we get all loaded up, we come in, and the pastor's out front, and he's, shaking hands, and there's ushers, and there's all these greeters, and Jenny was like, what's all this? Because that's not what she grew up with. Me, on the other hand, I'm like, well, this is normal. This is what it's supposed to be. Come in, and we sit in the back, because I'm a TO. We always sit in the back. We don't ever sit in the front. And we're sitting there, and so I'm already with my list of things to check the boxes so that I could find reasons not to come back. And so they doing the worship, and I'm like, oh, rats, it's good worship. They're not actually trying to have a concert up there. Man, okay, all right. So then Pastor Ron Sr., he started preaching, and he was taking a concept, and bringing it to a personal level. And I look over at January, and she's crying. I'm like, oh, dang it. This ain't going the way I planned. Oh, well, we can get through this one Sunday. So at the end of the service, we go out, and she goes, can we come back next Sunday? And I'm like, oh, man. Because my thought was, okay, it's going to last like 30 days, go for a couple of months, and then once that's done, then we'll get back to life as normal, and she'll be done with that, and it'll be okay. And the next Sunday, here we are sitting in the back again, and I look over and she's crying again. I'm like, oh, man. And I kept trying to find reasons not to come back. Never did, obviously. But I was just trying to be like invisible, because growing up in the church, I was convinced that as soon as they found out that I had grown up in the church, they were going to have me do something. Well, apparently I was really good at it, because Ron Sr. was talking about that a few years ago, and he goes, yeah, January would come, and then 3 months later, she brought her boyfriend. I'm like, I was there all the time. If I want to melt into the seat, I can do it. And, but then that went on for a few months, and at that time, Meadows only had one service, and so they started needing to go to a second one. And so they go, we're going to need ushers. I'm like, okay, I can do that. Well, I grew up in the church. I can do everything, but I'm not going to tell them that. And so I'm like, all right, God, if you want me to be an usher, then I want you have them call me. Now, mind you, I thought that they didn't have my phone number. Guess who gave it to them? 30 minutes later, I get this phone call. Hey, Scott, how would you like to be an usher? Now, growing up in the church, there's one thing that you do learn, is that if somebody makes a deal with God, and God follows through on his part, and they don't follow through on theirs, it generally doesn't work out well for that person. I did not want to become a modern-day Jonah. I know we're in the desert, but God would find a way. So I'm like, okay, God, I'll do it. And that's what changed me. Because all of a sudden, I go from being somebody who is just attending to actually being a part of it and actually starting to serve people. I'm starting to look outside of me. I'm starting to get invested in the people that are coming and being a part of a community. And that's how God softened my heart. That's how God changed me into realizing, you know what? You trying to do it your way has not worked for a really long time, so why you continue to do it? Finally, at men's camp, I'm like, okay, God, I give up. I'm tired of trying to do it on my own because it's not working. And so I went from an usher to head usher to service coordinator, men's ministry leader. Ron Sr. has this way of, when you're comfortable in your spot, he would always just kind of nudge you into the next thing. And that's how I never wanted to do any of that. But once I ended up being in those positions, I realized that's exactly how God wanted me to be, or where he wanted me to be. Also at that time, Meadows had a trip to the Philippines every year. It was a 2-week trip. And the first year we're here, January's like, I want to go to that trip. I'm like, no, I don't know enough about this church to go all the way halfway around the world to the Philippines. No way. The next year comes around, she goes, I want to go on that trip. I'm like, no, we can't. That's when we're getting married. Next year, I want to go on this trip. We're still paying off the wedding last year. No. That following year, I didn't have a choice. She's like, I'm going. I'm like, oh, all right. And so we go. I didn't want to send my wife halfway around the world by herself. So I'm like, okay, I'll go with you. So we go and we do that. And it was great. It was wonderful. It was fine. And I'm like, okay, I could check the Gone on a Missions Trip box on the church bingo card, right? And that was enough. I was okay. Well, also at the same time, we had a couple from El Salvador that they wanted to add a trip to go to El Salvador. And so Pastor Ron, Sr., he goes, hey, can you help organize that? Help them with the organization, the logistics on that. I'm like, fine, but I'm not going. I'm not going. I'll help, but I'm not going. As I was on that trip, because they had said that they didn't have enough people to sign up. And so like, hey, can you really go? I'm like, no, but I will. On that trip, the wife, who is extremely gifted when it comes to children, that's her gifting. She does wonderful when it comes to children. Logistics, not so much. And she was trying to do both. And she was overwhelmed, and it was stressing her out. And so I talked to her husband. I'm like, look, I'm good at logistics. You know this. Let me take that part of it, and I will just tell me where we need to be when we need to be there, and I'll make sure everybody gets there. And so all of a sudden now she's relieved because she could just focus on what she's good at. But that changed my life. All of a sudden, how God had made me, whom I am at my core, was connected and aligning with God and his plan for what's going on. And that connection changed how I saw missions. It changed how I saw ministry. It changed how I saw God and how he was going to use me. I had never felt such fulfillment in what I was doing in my life. I had done logistics on other things, but tie it to missions, and it took it to a whole nother level. I come back from that trip, and all of a sudden I become the missions guy. Like, don't start talking to me about missions, because that's going to be a 30-minute conversation, and you're going to be signed up on the next one by the time we're done. But I was good at short-term missions. I mean, be gone for a week or two, and I mean that's good. That's my comfort zone. Until we went on a trip to Mexico, and I was leading a trip, and we were connecting with a couple of other churches. But one of the things we're doing is with a church in Tijuana, all of us were going down and doing a VBS down in Ensenada, and they did everything. These teenagers, they did all the song, like they made up the songs and the teachings and the motions, and this was not a prepackaged VBS. They made everything. And so us adults are in the back. There I am in the back again. Anyway, we're in the back and we're starting to talk. And the missionaries who are down there are saying, hey, we get a lot of short-term teams and we need some more help. What do you think about coming down and helping? And I'm like, no. I'm a short-term team guy. Short-term. Very 2 weeks max. Like, no, think about it. I'm like, no, I know that's not me. The next day, walking by, and I hear them talking to January, and I hear the same conversation going off. I'm like, hey, I already said no and stopped talking to my wife about it. But at the end of that trip, they did convince us to come down and just see what they do for 2 weeks. And they needed some help with getting some people around. Some pastors were doing a vision trip, and so the first week, not a big deal. Everything was going as planned. Second week, we go and we're helping to take a pastor across Tijuana over, and he's speaking on a Wednesday night. At the end of the service, we're on our way back, and we do like we always do after service. We stop and get tacos. And I'm sitting there next to the pastor who was speaking, and he goes, you know what my favorite part was? Because he was talking about when Joshua was taking over for Moses, and his sermon was about extending the tent pegs. And he goes, my favorite part is when God was talking to Joshua, and he goes, fear not, for just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. And in that moment, I heard God tell me, as I was with your dad, so I will be with you. And that changed everything. In fact, that's the chair I was sitting on. It's still there. I go by it every once in a while. It's out by the airport. Every time I go by, I'm like, that's where God called me. See, God can use tacos. Just letting you know. There's something sacred about tacos. But I had grown up and I had seen all the stuff that my dad had gone through. I heard, the 2 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday phone call and all the things that come with being in ministry and stuff. And I'm like, that's not me. But then I also had seen on how God had been with my dad during those times as well, those tough times. So I'm like, okay, if you're with me, then okay, we'll be missionaries. I'm never 100% sure on anything. I never give 10 stars. I always want to give them room for improvement. I don't want them to rest on the laurels. I get back, because January wasn't with me on that thing. She was back home. She wasn't feeling well. And so I get back to the house and like, hey, guess what? We're moving to Mexico. And her first is like, are you 100% sure? And I'm like, absolutely. She's like, oh, because she knows I'm not a 100% person. There's only two things in my life that I've been 100% sure on. One was becoming a missionary to Mexico, and the second one was marrying January. Other than that, I'm usually about 75, 80% sure on things. But that's what changed. Hearing God's voice saying, this is what I'm calling you to, changed how I saw everything. So we go and we get back here to Las Vegas after that trip, and I go into Pastor Ron Sr.'s office, and I'm like, hey, guess what? We're going to be missionaries to Mexico. And I'm thinking, again, I'm breaking this news to him, and he's like, I knew I wasn't going to have you much longer. I'm like, could you have at least give me a clue on it? I mean, let me in on that. But we started the process, and then we deployed in November of 2016. And just helping out with the missionaries that were down there. And our sphere of influence at the time was what we thought was just going to be Tijuana, Rosarito, Ensenada, maybe Tecate. And in like 5 years, it would expand out to Mexicali and some other areas and stuff like that within 5 years. Well, 9 months after we get down there, the other missionary couple that we were there to be assistants to, they moved back to the States. And I'm like, okay, now what? And so at that point, I got appointed as the assistant to the National Missions Director for Foursquare, Mexico. So within 9 months, our sphere of influence ends up changing to the whole country of Mexico, not what I had planned. And things were going okay in that role until COVID hit in 2020, and then I actually got busier because my computer skills, I would say, actually became I became the Zoom guru for Foursquare. I don't know why that happened, but it did. And then that opened up some other doors until in 2023, I actually got appointed by the president of Foursquare Mexico as the National Missions Coordinator. During that time, there's a lot of other things that kind of opened doors for us. One of them was I started helping with the Foursquare Global Council. So that's made up of national leaders from all over the world. I also help with the Business Mission Network, the Shared Missions Committee, the Global Prayer Committee, and doing admin support for the Latin America region, or the Americas, I should say, which goes from Canada all the way down to Argentina. So I do a lot of admin support for a lot of these other things, which opens up some other doors. And that's kind of where we are right now, being able to do a lot of things. So let me talk a little bit about some of the things that we've been doing over the last 9 months or so. The first thing is the Ensenada church build, which was what Meadows was a part of. This is where it started. This is what we had to do. When we arrived for the church build, they actually did have the foundation poured already, but this is what we had started with. And that's what we had as far as the middle of day one, and then this is at the end of day 3. We started with a slab of concrete on day 1, and we were having a worship service at the end of day 3. This is Meadows doing this. But not just Meadows. This was actually a combination of 4 U.S. churches plus 2 Mexican churches all coming together to build this one. It's doing it in community. Now, for those that like to plan ahead, this coming October, I just have to confirm the exact dates with Pastor Ron Jr. when he gets back from vacation tomorrow. But at the end of October, Meadows is going to go back down. But this time, we're not going to focus on constructing anything more than relationships. Because That's the bottom line. You can build stuff, and that's wonderful. But if you don't build relationships at the same time, it really doesn't have the same impact, and it doesn't have the long-term impact that we were hoping for. Because the whole idea is to build the relationship between that church and this church. And so the idea is to go down and actually work with them, and there's some other details we're working out, but it's going to be a more ministry-minded. And then the idea would be maybe in 2027 we go down and do some more construction for those that are constructed-minded. But that's what we did in October of last year. And then the next one, one of the other things that I get the privilege of doing is helping to facilitate and do the logistics for pastoral retreats. We had one in Zihuatanejo at the end of last year. Now, what happens is that a lot of these churches are spread out in a big area. And so there's a group of, these are people from, I want to say like 6 different churches out of the Washington State area all come together and put on a pastoral retreat for them. And they hold it in different areas of Mexico all the time. So I go and I'm able to talk about missions and meet the pastors and spend time with them and do some logistics. And then we also had one just the beginning of this year down in Ensenada. And this was the last night where we had a big worship time. But it's allowing the pastors to come down and come together and build relationships with other pastors in their area, get a little bit of downtime, kind of be able to get refreshed. So that's one of the things that we do. Then the next thing that I had on my calendar was this Global Mission Summit. This was something that was brand new. Foursquare had not done this to this scale. We had hoped for maybe about 20 to 24 global missions directors from all over the world. We ended up having 42 that showed up. We had somebody from South Korea. We had somebody from Cote d'Ivoire. We had somebody from Papua New Guinea. We had people from Europe. We had people from North America, South America, Central America, Venezuela, Costa Rica. I can go on and on. But it really was a global summit. The thing that we found out though, is that sometimes we were using the different vocabulary for things. And if you go to the next one, you can see that what we did is we had this as a roundtable discussion. So we had people from different parts of the world talking together. And these are all missions directors. These are all people that were in charge of doing missions. And what we found out was that a lot of them were they said they were sending out missionaries, but what they were doing is they were sending out and ministering to their own people in another country versus reaching some of the unreached. You see, currently, today, there are over 2,000 unreached people groups. And what does that mean? An unreached people group is a cultural group of people who, unless it gets brought from the outside in, the gospel will never reach them. The gospel has to come from outside. They do not have access to any way to hear the name of Jesus. They have no way of getting a Bible. They don't have any way, unless it comes from outside of their culture. They will never hear the gospel. 2,000 people groups around the world that have no access to the gospel. We have it so easy. We hear the name of Jesus all the time. A lot of it not in a very flattering way, but we do. The thing is that we need to be reaching those unreached. And that was what the focus was of these discussions. It's like, how do we do that? How do we change how we do things so that we are starting to reach these unreached people? And this conference that we had was actually, it's affecting how missions globally in the Foursquare movement is going to be done in the next 5 years. And I had the privilege of being there and also facilitating it in a logistical way. The other thing that I had going on and what we have coming up in the next year is the Global Youth Summit. Global Young Adult. this picture that we have here was last year in Cali, Colombia. And I was so fortunate in being able to help with the logistics on this. We had, I think it was like 14 different countries, and it was all in Spanish. And we actually had a group of about 12 come from Jamaica. They don't speak Spanish in Jamaica, but they came to this anyway because they wanted to get connected with the young adults of the region. That first night we're there, and they actually they had the Jamaicans do a little mini worship set. And at the end, they were doing this, and they were doing this all in English. And at the end, they were doing this song that everybody was just, it was bringing the Spirit in. And at the end of it, those from the audience were just, do it again, sing it again. Let's keep this going. And they did, and you could just feel the unity in the room. You felt the Spirit come down. You see, there was about 500 to 600 young adults, all from different countries, and some of them speaking different languages, coming together in one place at one time, and let the Spirit just do what it did. And I'm standing in the back of the room, and I'm like, whatever I need to keep facilitating this. Whatever you need me to do, count me in, because this is what the future is. These are the young adults. These are the ones that they're the ones that are going to be going next. How do we do that? How do we make that better? In 2027, we're going to do a global summit, and we're looking at about 5,000 young adults. 5,000 from all over the world, all coming together in one time. And then afterwards, we're going to have some opportunities to do some short-term mission trips around Manila. And that's where it is, I'm sorry. It's going to be in Manila in the Philippines in late July. Young adults from all over the world getting together, worshiping God, building relationships, finding out they're not the only ones doing things, and finding out how can we do better together. And so I get an opportunity to be able to work on some of the logistics for that. I was blessed to be able to go to Turkey this last year. And I took a group of, I was helping to take a group of Latinos to Turkey. We went to Istanbul, and then we went down to Izmir. And the thing is that I've been talking about this for years, about how in that Middle East region, that if I'm walking down the street, I have a tendency of garnering a little bit more attention than the average. And it has nothing to do with the length of my hair. I saw a whole bunch of guys that had longer hair than I did down in Turkey, so. We were putting flyers out for an event, and I'm there with 4 other Latinos plus our guide, Turkish guide. And we were walking down the street, and I'm just at the back. I'm just not doing anything. I'm just standing there. And this guy walks by, and he starts yelling at me. Something in Turkish. I don't speak Turkish, but he was yelling at me. The thing was, he was completely ignoring the Latinos that were actually doing something. I'm just standing there. And it just reinforced what I've been saying all along, is that the cultural connection between Latin America and the Middle East is so close. Those cultures are very close together. So the thing is that what would take me a long time to kind of get used to living in that culture would take them a very short period of time. Their access is immediately greater than anything I can do. And so in the group, if you the photo, out of this group, we had 3 people that are saying God's calling them to be missionaries to Turkey. This is just a small sample of what we're going to be doing. One of the things that I'm working on and being a part of is really focusing on getting Latinos to that Middle East area, because they can do a whole lot more than I can do. They could do and have much more of an impact than I can. And why would I be forcing myself into that situation? But what I can do is I can help them get there. And so the idea is that I'll probably be making another trip this next spring to be able to do exactly that and take another group of them. I get the benefit of being able to help do that. We also did get to go down and see. I had to do a selfie. You know, if I came home without a selfie, January would be very mad at me. So this is in the ruins of Ephesus. And if you go to the next slide, that's the library and stuff. One of the things that did, we didn't do a whole lot of touristy things. We were doing a lot more ministry aspect. But one of the things is that I walked down the same streets that Paul did. But the other thing is that I learned some historical things about the city of Ephesus that I never knew before. And what it did is it changed how I see the book of Ephesians completely, because now I understand the city it was written to a little bit better, just a little bit better. And so now when I'm hearing him talk to the church in Ephesus, then I'm like, oh, that's why he says that. Oh, okay, that makes more sense to me now. That's not the purpose of these trips, but the thing is that understanding the culture, understanding the people, changes on how you see things. And that was the benefit of that. The next. So this one here, the lady in the white jacket, she was one of our hosts, and she's a Christian. The rest of the ladies are not. They're either agnostic or Muslim. But they come from a section of their community that are called gypsies. And a lot of these, or some of them, are either widows or just don't have an opportunity to generate any income on their own. And so, but what they can do is they can knit. And if you see, they have these little Christmas stockings. So they've actually started, it's a business that she gets these. She started off with about 10, and now they're up to 70. And of these ladies that make these Christmas stockings, they'll even put your name in there, and they do it off of Etsy. So these ladies are actually able to generate some income. Well, what she's found out is that talking to these ladies, that they will do their morning prayers, they'll do their morning readings of the Quran, these Muslims, and they'll do it all in Arabic. Guess what? They don't speak Arabic. So do you think that there's any connection there? Do you think there's anything going? No, they're just doing it for the sake of doing it. So, when you're sitting around doing a bunch of knitting, guess what you do? You start talking. And then they start asking about how she does and how she works with being a Christian. And she goes, well, I have the Bible in Turkish. So you want one? And so now she has about 7 of these ladies that they actually have a Bible study. Just because she cared enough to set up something as a business for them. Just so that they could generate some income, and she cared about them. And now that is giving them an opportunity to actually learn about Christianity and change some things. So it's simple stuff like that we're able to be connected to. What's the next? Oh. There's nothing unique about me. The only thing that makes me different than any of you about being a missionary or going on these trips and stuff is that. I said yes. But there is a second part to it. I showed up. That's all that God has called us to do. Say yes and show up. Because we've all been called to go somewhere. I happen to be called to go to Mexico. But everybody has been called to go somewhere. If we look at Acts 1:8, we will see it says, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes on you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea, Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. Do you notice that there's concentric rings that come with that? He starts off with Jerusalem, which is right where they're at. Some people are called to be their witnesses right where they're at. Other people are called to Judea, which is the region. Some people are called to Samaria, which is their enemy. And then there's to the ends of the earth. But I want to focus on one word here in this passage, and that is witnesses. You've called to be my witnesses. Now, in the U.S. legal system, what is a witness? It's a witness, they talk about what they've experienced, they've seen, they've heard. It's only what they can only talk about their own stuff. They can't talk about somebody else's stuff. And that's all Jesus has asked you to do, is to be a witness of what he's done in your life. Because each one of us have a unique story that somebody out there needs to hear. That if you're still here on this earth, you still have a role to play. If you're still here, God's plan for you isn't done yet. I don't care what part of life you're in, what stage of life you're in, whether you're young, whether you're old, or you think that you have nothing left to give. If you're still here, God disagrees with that. He says you still have a story to tell someone somewhere. But he doesn't ask you to do it by yourself. In Matthew 28, 19 through 20, it says, "Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you, and surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." I want to focus on another word in this one, and it's the word go. He's called you to go. He's called each one of us to go. It's not a question of if you're called to go. And like I said before, no matter where you are in life, God has things for you to do in partnership with him. He's wanting you to do things together. If I can get the worship team to go ahead and come on up. The question is not about if you're called to go. The only question is where. You see, some of you are called to go to your neighborhood because you're the only light in a very dark place. Or you're called to be that light at your workplace. Or you're called to go to Mexico, down to Ensenada in October. Hint, hint, hint. The thing is that that's not the question. The thing is, some of you may already be where God's called you to be. He just needs you now to be his witness. Now, when I have teams come down, they're always, some of them are kind of scared about the whole concept of telling their testimony. But it's very, very simple. Now, this is if you're writing things down, this is going to be a very long, complicated formula here. I was, then God, now I am. That's your testimony. You just fill in those little blanks. And that is you being a witness. Sometimes your witness is not saying anything at all. It's how you treat people. It's how you do not fly off the handle when something is going wrong and everybody else is. Maybe it's that being the calm person when the storm is going all around and people are like, how can you be calm in this? It's because you have a hope that they don't, and they don't understand it, but they want to. And unless you tell them, they will never know. There's somebody out there that needs to hear your specific story, needs to hear my specific story. We just got to find out where that is. And if you're already there, then how are you being a witness? How can you increase your witness in those areas? Some people are called in their neighborhood. Some people are called to the city. Some are like me that get called to another nation. But we've all been called to go. So let's look for those places. Let's listen to God about where does he want you to go? Because he's got a plan for you. You're still here. Let me just close out on a quick prayer. Father, thank you so much for this day. Thank you for calling us to be a part of your plan to change the world. You could have done this all on your own. You don't need us, but you want us to be a partner. We ask that you would speak into our ears, speak to our hearts about those times where you want us to be your witness, because you said you would be with us. You are the same God that spoke those words to Joshua, talking about Moses. You're the same God that has been talking to us for centuries. You're the same God that called me to Mexico that is calling them to somewhere else. You're the same God that had Moses lead the Israelites out of Egypt. You're the same God that was in Jerusalem saying, "Go, I will be with you." You're the same God that's calling us to go somewhere and be your witnesses now. And Lord, we just ask that you would open our eyes to the doors that you have before us, the doors that you're opening. Help us to make sure that we are not missing those moments, those divine encounters that you have put before us. Help us to be your witnesses in the weeks, months, years ahead.